Welcome everyone to another episode of Follow the Light Music Review. My name is John DeLaurentis, and this is episode 5 in the series Revisiting the Classics. And today we're going to be looking at one of my all-time favorite albums. It also contains one of my all-time favorite songs in Christian music, probably in my top 3. But before we get into that, I would like to encourage you to please subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below on the content of this video, and then please ring the bell so that you get notifications on when new content comes into the channel. All right, so what is the spotlight today is Fireworks' second album, Shatter the Darkness. And this album is an album, one of those albums that I've listened to so many times I could look at the song title and the song's playing in my head. I know exactly how it sounds. I've heard it so many times and I never get tired of it. I want to go into a little bit about Fireworks before we get into the album and specifically look at all the songs here. Fireworks was formed in 1976 and it actually came out of a collective of people who were backup singers. Okay, so we had Marty McCall, Gary Pig, and Gwen Moore, and Cindy Lipford also, who ended up going on to record it on their first album, was a part of that as well. And these were basically session players that were brought in by Chris Christian, the producer, and they do backup vocals on some very high-level albums. They were on Amy Grant's first album, the debut album. They were on B.J. Thomas albums, and Second Chapter of Acts, of course, had begun their life on Myrrh Records, and then they left Myrrh Records to another label. So Myrrh Records was looking for the next Second Chapter of Acts, and so Fireworks was kind of born out of that that decision by Myrrh to bring on this vocal trio. And so they recorded their first album, Fireworks, which I have right here. And as you can see, they had them as a vocal trio here. Now, Gwen Moore, who was in the original configuration of Fireworks, was replaced by Cindy Lipford on this album when it came out. So she did not appear on any of their albums, although she was a part of Fireworks with live performances, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But this first album was really not a group. It was called Fireworks, and it was centered around the 3 of them as backup singers, but it really was then some session musicians that were there. So they weren't really a band. They were a vocal trio that was backed up by studio musicians. And so on this particular debut album, you have people like drummer Lanny Avery on here, Larry London on one song, Kenneth Malone on another. Guitars were handled by Chris Christian, who produced the album for Home Sweet Home Productions. And keyboards were done by Marty McCall. So Marty McCall was a keyboard player and songwriter. And Shane Keister and Ron Oates. And then bass was handled by Chris Harris and Steve Schaefer on a couple tracks. Synthesizer by Shane Keister and flute by Marilyn Maingard. So again, that formed the core of this band. And this album is kind of like in the vein of Second Chapter of Acts. It's a very mellow album. I would classify it as easy listening, adult contemporary. It did have a radio hit on here, Don't Look Back, probably the most known song off this album here. But this was definitely mellow affair. Good songwriting, Marty McCall, excellent songwriter. And he, it says here that he composed all the songs except Maybe It's Love, which was co-written with Gary Pig. So it did debut not only this vocal trio with beautiful harmonies, but it did also introduce the world to Marty McCall's talent as a songwriter and a keyboard player on here. But when they got to Shatter the Darkness, they kind of solidified the band a little bit more. And on here it was kind of like less of, it's a vocal trio now. It's more like a band. And so the female vocals were gone. Cindy Lipford is not on this album. Gwen Moore did not all of a sudden join for this album. There's no female vocals at all. Marty McCall basically is the lead vocalist on this album. And on this particular album, they have, looking at my notes here, Shatter the Darkness basically had more of a core of a band on it. So Fireworks kind of went from this vocal trio concept of easy listening to a band with more solidified musicians and a little bit more rock added into it. And so we have here on this album, bass handled by Bob Sinkovic and Chris Harris. We have drums handled by Lanny Avery. Guitar was handled by Jerry Gaston and Mark Christian. Keyboards and vocals were Marty McCall. And then, of course, Christian also produced this as well. And this came out on the Myrrh Records. This came out in 1979. The first album was 1977. But what's interesting is there was released some historic concerts. Now, what's very interesting, and I find very ironic, is none of these Fireworks albums, except for one, Marty McCall and Fireworks Up album, which is more, it's an album that was kind of in between the band albums and released under Marty McCall and Fireworks name, and it came right before the Sightseeing at Night album, which was their final studio album, and that was released on CD in Japan. But it's more like a Marty McCall solo album. It's more mellow stuff. But there was in 2000 two CDs, and this is what's ironic. None of the official Fireworks albums have ever seen the release on official CDs except for that one that's Marty McCall and Fireworks Up, which was released in Japan. However, there is two CDs that were released of live concerts of Fireworks that are historical archives. These came out in 2000, and these are long out of print. These are, if I had to count two rare CDs I have in my collection, it's this. These are long out of print and impossible to find now. But these came out in 2000 on Replay Records. And this one documents a concert from November 25th, 1977. You can see that there. And you have Fireworks composed of Marty McCall, Gary Pig, and Gwen Moore. Okay, so Gwen Moore, who was in that original core group, did concerts with them, and so she's on here. And then Chris Harris and Lanny Avery being the rest of the band musical support here. So this is a great archival recording, and this recording has some songs from the first album, obviously. This is 1977, and that was when the debut came out. And this has tracks that are on there. Of course, Don't Look Back is on here, and some of the other tracks that are on here. And actually, Gwen Moore is giving the notes inside here and gives a little Fireworks history. So she's definitely a part of the first Fireworks, but never on any of the officially released albums. But she is here in these live performances here. And there's a second one that came out too in 2000, and this one is February 4th, 1978. Gwen Moore again on here with Marty McCall and Gary Pig, Chris Harris, and Lanny Avery. And this one has some songs that would appear on the Shatter the Darkness album. Calling My Name being one of them. The other one is The Rock and Roll Band, one of the more rock and roll songs on the Shatter the Darkness album. And the other one that's on here, let me see, I saw it earlier. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just those two. Unfortunately, Shatter the Darkness is not on here, which I don't know whether they, ever had done it live in concert, but that is one of the songs that Gwen Moore co-wrote with Marty McCall. And in fact, Calling My Name, which is on the Shatter the Darkness album, is written by Gwen Moore solely. So it's interesting. On the very first Fireworks album, nothing but Marty McCall written songs, except for that one that was co-written. But Shatter the Darkness, we do get a couple songs on here that were co-written or written exclusively by Gwen Moore, which is interesting. And we see that she was a talent in terms of a songwriter as well. But like I said, that's the only thing you're going to find on Fireworks on CD. And of course, you can't get those CDs anymore. They're long out of print. But I'm so glad I have them. Definitely rarities in my collection that I'm glad I have. And I have, of course, the Japan Up album by Marty McCall on Fireworks, which is, like I said, it's in the Fireworks discography, but it's not really a Fireworks album. And what's interesting about this one here is they decided to put Shatter the Darkness featuring Marty McCall. I don't know why they thought it was necessary to put featuring Marty McCall. He was on the first album. He wrote all the songs in the first album. Maybe because the only thing I could think of is why they said featuring Marty McCall is the other singers are not here. Gary Pig is not on here, and Cyndi Lippert's not on here, who recorded on the first album. So the trio thing kind of went away, and this became more of a band album. So let's talk about this album, why I love it so much. This is where the band really started becoming, adding more rock elements in there. And in fact, I think attested by the song Rock Band, this was a band, this is what they wanted. They did not want to become the next second chapter of Access. They wanted to be their own unique band. And Marty McCall, like I said, stellar songwriter and singer. So this album opens up with Change My Heart. It opens up with this kind of very synthesizer heavy song, which goes into this nice kind of bridge type thing with the guitar in there. Not a really hard rocking song, but a really good way to open the album with this kind of like synthesizer based song. Beautiful Woman, the second track on here is an absolutely gorgeous ballad about the woman caught in adultery. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Beautiful chorus on this one. And then that's followed by After the Rain, which is a little bit more of a rollicking up-tempo song with the keyboards featuring Marty McCall's kind of keyboard playing really highlighted in it. And that's one of the songs that's co-written by Gwen Moore from here. So that's obviously one of the songs that was probably done in the early days. And in fact, I think that's the other song that's on there that I couldn't remember, After the Rain. If I didn't mention it before, that's on that live album, the 78 one. That's followed by Calling My Name, which is a beautiful ballad with a beautiful, like, emotive guitar in it. And that's Gwen Moore who wrote that song. Absolutely beautiful song. Side one of this album ends with Rock Band. So this is where they start getting more rollicking. And it's kind of like a declaration type song that, rock music being called of the devil, how can you be doing rock music? And that song is kind of saying the devil doesn't have a hold of this rock and roll band. So that's Rock Band, ends that thing. Then we open up side two, Like Children. This is another kind of like ballady type song with the beautiful singing on it. And then I Know Power, another up-tempo kind of song on here, raises it up a little bit more. And then Love You Tonight is a more kind of mid-tempo ballad type song as well, but a little bit more upbeat, I guess. Maybe that's not exactly the right word, but not a straight ballad. It's like basically a ballad, but it kind of has like really emotive guitar line on it and everything. Then Shatter the Darkness comes on. The song that every single time I hear it, I'm blown away. Shatter the Darkness it's an incredible song with incredible guitar work. Now, unfortunately, I don't know whether this ever came with a liner note, because my copy is just simple sleeve here with the Myrrh record label there. There's no lyric sheet in there. So if someone else owns this album out there and it has a pull-out lyric sheet, let me know. I'd like to know. I've never seen a picture of a sleeve insert with the lyrics in it on Discogs. There's no picture of it, but it's very possible. Sometimes when they pressed albums, they had an insert, and then after second pressing came out, they didn't do the insert anymore. Who knows what the reason is? So I don't know exactly who does the lead guitar work. My guess is it may be Jerry Gaston. But Mark Christian also plays guitar in here, but it could be Jerry Gaston. But the guitar work is absolutely incredible on Shatter the Darkness. And this is one of the songs that was co-written with Gwen Moore here. And this particular song has, if I were to rate my favorite guitar solos on songs in Christian music. This song with its guitar solo would rate up there, definitely in my top 10 favorite guitar solos of all time in Christian music. And the guitar work is just woven in. There's kind of like a wah-wah type sound that's in the choruses, and one of the lines of the song is kind of mimicking with the wah-wah guitar what Marty McCall is singing in the song. And then it just builds up into this guitar solo in here that is absolutely just takes my breath away. It's melodic. It's incredible. It builds up with intensity, and it just isn't. It just I can hear it right now in my head, and I'm blown away every time I hear it. So, "Shatter the Darkness," one of my all-time favorite songs in Christian music, and one of my all-time favorite guitar solos on a Christian song ever, on "Shatter the Darkness." And then the album ends with a mellow track called "The World," which is basically a very quiet song with just Marty McCall playing the keyboards. But every song on this album is great, whether it's slow or fast. I would not say that this was not predominantly a rock album. It has some rock elements into it, but it still has that kind of a adult contemporary type sound, maybe comparable to like Keith Green, maybe. Not so much Second Chapter of Acts like they wanted them to come, because there's not that vocal dynamic in here. It's basically Marty McCall handling the vocals here, but it definitely adds in rock elements, and they definitely do it full force on "Shatter the Darkness," which is such an incredible album. So incredible song and album, of course. But this album, definitely one of my all-time favorite albums by Fireworks, and maybe I'll do a spotlight on Fireworks and go over the rest of their discography at some point. But of course, Marty McCall, when Fireworks ended, went on to greater fame with First Call, returning back to his roots of a vocal trio. So First Call went back into that kind of adult contemporary, almost some jazzy elements in some of their releases that they came out with. The musicians were kind of like, there was kind of a little bit of stability with the musicians, but then it did change. In fact, Louis Weaver of Petra appears on the Sightseeing at Night album as the drummer. So there was some different change up and lineups that happened here. But again, Fireworks, "Shatter the Darkness," one of my all-time favorite Christian albums. I've listened to it dozens, maybe even hundreds of times. And the song "Shatter the Darkness," one of my all-time favorite songs in Christian music, with one of my all-time favorite guitar solos in Christian music. So great album. Unfortunately, the debut album, "Shatter the Darkness," not available on CD, never released on CD. And Myrrh Records is currently under the ownership, the catalog of Myrrh Records is currently under the ownership of Word Curb, which is a label that Girder Music has worked with. We got the first two Petra albums from Girder. They worked that out. And if you saw those re-releases of the two the Petra debut and the Come and Join Us album that were released on Myrrh, they just say Curb Word on there because that's how they operate, but Girder did everything else. I worked as one of the copy editors on those two Petra albums. So I would love Girder to be able to get these Fireworks albums out on CD. It would be wonderful. I know a lot of people love this band and have talked about this band on the different forums on Facebook and in other places. So it's an album I really would love to see released officially on CD. The later albums came out, they switched labels, and they went on to MCA Songbird, I believe, mainstream label, and that's how they released Live Fireworks, which I mentioned in my introduction to my channel as being kind of my first introduction before after the Found Free album I mentioned that someone gave to me. And then Sightseeing at Night was also released on MCA as well. But great band, great catalog of albums. Marty McCall, stellar musician, stellar vocalist, stellar songwriter. And so great album, Shatter the Darkness. Let me know what you think about this album or Fireworks in general. I'd love to hear it in the comment. Before I go, I would just again encourage you to please subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment again, like I said, below, so I can hear what you think about Fireworks and Shatter the Darkness. And you can ring the bell for notifications as new content gets added. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you're not familiar with Fireworks-Shatter the Darkness, go on to YouTube. It's there. You can stream it. You can listen to it there. Fantastic album that, again, I hope sees the light of day on CD, properly released officially after all these years, 1979 when it came out. Okay, so as always, follow the light that shines out of the darkness. God bless everyone.